Thank you, Jacques. Okay, the recording's in progress. I'm Arja, and I'm really happy to be here tonight. As I said, I'm going to be reading a whole lot of new poems. Some of these poems have been published, but not in a collection. I thought rather than reading from my collections, I'd read some stuff that I've done in the last few years. Just a little note, I have a little bit of a cough. I don't know what it's from. I'm not sick. I haven't been sick. So now and again I might cough, and just excuse me for that. Well, I've got some water and I'll just glug water when I need to. In fact, I'm going to need to right now. Let me do that. Somebody said it's the air in Johannesburg and I must move. So it's a good excuse to move. Okay. The first poem is called Adios mi vida, which has been written for Socorro Ortega Medina, who was my Spanish grandmother. And it'll become clear what the poem is about, and I'm happy to answer questions afterwards about this poem or any of the poems. So, it is only years later that I learn that she looked for me when I was a child. She hired a private investigator, sent letters to my South African grandparents. They tore them up, I presume. They did not tell my mother. Adios, mi vida, I said to her when I was 3, leaving Spain for Israel with my parents. Goodbye, my soul. Did she sense she was not to see me again until I was an adult? She said goodbye to so many grandchildren when their parents went to live in Kenya or Sweden or Morocco, but they all returned. No silence, no not knowing. When I was 5, my mother and I fled Jerusalem on a dark morning, fleeing from my father. I can still taste my father's fear. Socorro, my grandmother, heard from me next when I was 17, and wanting to know the family I'd never known. At 20, I arrived back in Malaga, where I had been born. It was 1 in the morning, the street sodium orange and yellow. I spoke no Spanish, she no English. I wasn't to know how she had hoped, or that she was convinced she would see me again. I was young and shy, my voice too high-pitched, my porcelain face unmarked. I did not know grief, or loss, or longing. I said goodbye again 5 weeks later on another early morning. I was going to Paris. She made me a chorizo and cheese sandwich. For later, she said. I could imagine that I'd need it. But hours later, not knowing how to navigate another strange city, I ate it, hungry, thankful. I'd stepped inside the old lift in her building. She stood at the doorway, and I didn't know that was the last time I'd see her. Years later again, on another trip to Spain, now 35, I heard that she'd been looking for me for years. Tears came to my eyes. I thought of all the time she had looked, hoped, somehow trusted. How painful that must have been, to love and lose a grandchild, to keep her tight in a fractured heart, because there was no other way. I dreamed I was pregnant. I dreamed I was pregnant the other night. I lay my hand across my sloping belly. I was in some kind of castle, as one is in dreams. But in this one, unlike all the other dreams in which I've been pregnant, I did not feel that same panic, the fear of being pregnant, the horror of it. This time I enjoyed feeling the swell of it, another life ahead. And when I awoke, it was not with heart-pounding relief at finding that I was not with child, but instead a wistful longing to hold on to a dream in which life was beautiful. And now we return to Spain, but Spain and South Africa, as you'll see. This poem is called Looking for Spain. In the flamenco show at a neighborhood bistro, where the dancers twirled, where the dancers twirled on a narrow veranda, and the paella was missing an essential spice, becoming a bland rice dish instead. In trying to listen to a Malaga radio station on TuneIn, but they speak so fast I miss all the words. In watching Spanish films and trying to learn the language by reading the subtitles. In renewing my passport at the Spanish embassy and not being able to reply in the language. Every part of me yearning to speak the words ripped away when I was 3 years old. In seeing my Spanish features in photos and in a mirror, carrying a Spanish surname, in a longing that can't be contained in a South African paella or watching South Africans dancing flamenco. In the bite of a mantecado imported from Spain, in the one-dimensional photos of Malaga scrolled through on my phone screen. The next poem is called July 3rd, 2015. It's a decade since we sat in the lounge and you said the words that ended us. It wasn't a surprise. Moving in together parted us. The shock of it, like a car crash, I said to her a few weeks later. But it wasn't a car crash. It was a meteor slamming into Earth, tilting it off axis, plunging the world into frozen darkness. I groped through it for years and years, holding lamplights of oil as I made my way through a seemingly endless night. It is over, a wan spring light. Pale pastel tendrils reach out here and there, illuminating this new world. But sometimes the echo of that long ago night leaves me shedding a tear at midnight, remembering what might have been, remembering your slim brown body and warm brown eyes. We have two moon poems next. For about a year, I was writing poems about the new moon, and I discovered that the new moon is called different things in the southern hemisphere and the northern hemisphere, but that there's a name for all of them, usually relating to the seasons, into what's going on. So the first of these is called August Moon, Hungry Moon. And these are the northern hemisphere names for them. In the southern hemisphere, this is known as a storm, snow, and wolf moon. The hungry moon shines down like ice. Mars is a small red dot beside it. The hungry moon looks down at me and seems to know what I'm thinking and what not to say. The August winds have blown all day, agitating the wind chimes, pushing through the cracks in the windows, making the roof tiles grate against each other. Perhaps I am still hungry myself, hungry for answers that will never come, for the past, for my lost lover's body, for the friend who flies in from far away and flies away again, and I'm reminded of what is lost. But this is also a soft, gentle hunger. How can I explain it? That it is a presence, but not a threat now, even a way of life. The moon's all-seeing eyes will grow thin and curve into a crescent. Mars will disappear. The snow moon shines pearly. I want to cup the orb of the full moon, feel the power of it in my fingers. Peer hard enough and it looks as if the moon has continents, dark smudges against the pearly opal. And the silent sea of tranquility, icy, dead, unknowing, not a sea at all. And then the strawberry moon. Strawberry moon. I learned the names for full moons long after writing poems about them every month. But somehow you kept appearing in them. So I stopped and took photos of the moon instead. An ethereal blue moon floating in a blue, pale sky. A golden moon framed by protective trees. A fuzzy moon, with all its outlines blurred, in the shape of spiny flowers edged against it. In August, a hungry moon seemed to fill the night, and a sugar moon rose for me in September. In October, I was ready for the waking moon, with the milk moon following in November, and seeing at last December's strawberry moon. I actually have two versions of that. Douglas Reed Skinner published that in stanzas and edited it amazingly well, and it was a huge lesson in how to edit a poem. So I also have the old version, but I'm not going to read that. Cave Dreaming. At a replica of the Lascaux Caves, erected in a museum in Johannesburg's inner city, I can almost hear these people who lived 20,000 years ago, who were just like us. The lifelike models are of a woman sewing, a young girl, a hunter, eyes staring. I traced my fingers over the paintings they made, the whirl of drawings, forms, animal shapes, trying to find my way back into their world. Sitting quietly in dim golden light, the city I live in is gone. On the museum boards I read that one day we might be able to use technology to hear how they spoke. I sit for a long time among the humming lights, straining to hear until there's a sound, a movement, the smell of animal fats heated for light, the rasp of needle through skin, and the strange rough sounds of another language comes whispering through the centuries to me. I'm writing also a series of poems about childhood. I've got all sorts of ideas, but so far I've got these two, which I'm happy to share. I attended earlier the launch of Alan Finlay's book. I can't remember, Lookma something. Sorry, Alan, can't remember the book, but it's a fantastic collection. And he writes about childhood, so I was fascinated to see how he goes about it too. So this one is called 9 Years Old 1. We're allowed Coca-Cola as a special treat in tiny square wine glasses on Saturday nights. How we savor the sparkling black drink, wanting more, yet knowing that's all. No wonder, in a family of 3 children and 2 parents, a 1-litre bottle doesn't go very far. I, of course, come from a family of 1 child, 1 mother. Coke goes further then, although there's more silence. 9 years old, 2. The mother of 3 wears a costume at the pool to cover her stretched stomach. She has booked a tummy tuck in a few weeks' time, she tells my mother, who holds her own stomach in. My mother diets constantly, smokes cigarettes, nibbles sparingly through the day, eats more salads and potatoes. My mother's friends smoke cigarettes with her, tan darkly, buy white bread, make pies, drink far too much coffee, and run on adrenaline and the hope of male glances, comparing whose breasts are perkiest. Another friend, young and single, sits at the edge of the pool and also holds her stomach in. This is so that she'll attract a man, she explains to me. Another friend of my mother's asks me to rub suntan lotion all over her back. Everyone wants to tan. No one has heard of sunblock. I flinch from touching the woman's moles, which are scattered along the top of her back. We eat watermelon after lunch and swim off the sticky residue in the blue pool. It is such a long time ago. 1981 and summer. I can still feel the watermelon's sticky juice on my fingers. What love was like. It was you running your hand over the scars, and I knew they were accepted. It was you phoning me from your car, upset over something that had happened. And even though the sound was distorted through the Bluetooth reception, I held on, listening to you. It was in the purple cake you brought for me on a Friday night, and the rose quartz rocks you carried down the mountain. It was the softness of your eyes, the twinkle in them as you laughed. It was the way you held on to me the night your mother died, and your father phoned to tell you at 1 in the morning. And it was the way you said you'd be there when my own mother would die. It was there when I took you to a cricket match, when I was offered tickets, because you liked cricket, or when you assembled the white trestle desk I had brought, determined that I would have use of it that day. Love was there in your accepting hands on my body, and mine on yours. In the ice cream kiss we gave each other, as you ran your tongue along places you'd never reached before. It was there in the years. And it was there, that terrible night in winter, when you said you couldn't take it any longer, and knew I couldn't either. You snapped the thread that joined us, and love was like that too. The dead come to tell me. I dream of my former mother's. Let me start again. I dream of my former lover's mother again. She is plumper. She stands there speaking about South African politics. She used to read about in the newspapers. But I don't understand what she is saying. It's the same when I dream about my dead grandfather. He talks in English and I don't understand a word. The dead come to tell me they're all right, or I am. Their messages, when I can understand them, are short. Just after we parted, your mother came, looking sad and saying, "It is what it is." You were shocked, because these were the words she often used. I did not know that. I only met her that once, when we travelled to see her. My own dead father was also short on words, during that terrible time when you and I were parting. He said, "You have one life, live it." We enter another winter now. And I am even looking forward to it. Not the cold, or huddling in front of the inadequate bar heaters, but the long, elongated stretch of time that can make a difference, bring change. The possibilities of this, how it happens that lives may change. The sun may come out after days of rain, that the food will taste of something again, as food should. That time will close the fractures, heal, as time is meant to do, and does sometimes. I am hoping to make something of this, to see the shapes in the smoke of the incense. Rounds of rice paper. I wrote our names on rounds of rice paper, watching as the river dissolved our bonds. I called to the water. 2 ducks floated past. I walked on. The half moon cast her light on me. On the beach at Umhlanga. Time for another drink of water. On the beach at Umhlanga. On the beach at Umhlanga, we met a German man and his wife. Also tourists, also taking photos. We smiled at each other, and through mime and a word, he offered to snap us together. His English wasn't very good. He smiled as he took a photo, but you put your hand on my leg, and his face became grim. He handed back the camera without a smile. It was my first understanding of what life would be like with a woman. 2 years later, in a darkened movie house, you withdrew my hand from yours, when a big, burly man came to sit next to me, and I had to watch the film with your absence, that withdrawal. This was not so long ago. Gay marriage had been legal for years, and gay rights enshrined in the Constitution. On afternoons walking at the golf course, you again withdrew your hand when others came near. You'd had incidents in the past. I had to respect that, but each withdrawal was a betrayal. This was not so long ago. And the final poem is on the Gau train. A man fell asleep on me on one of those afternoons. He was tall and thin. On another afternoon it was a fat man, and on another a woman's wide arms touched mine all the way to the final station. I came home and washed my arm with sunlight liquid. You watched. On the train I read mostly, as I was jolted by elbows and arms, trying to lose myself for 40 minutes each way. I watched Pretoria slide away, and Centurion came into view. Near Johannesburg the line went underground. Rushing through the dark tunnels I read, on Kindle, on paper. Something was wrong. I felt it the first week I started catching the train. As the train pulled out and the Voortrekker monument loomed up, I knew and didn't know. 9.5 months of the train, rattling me to a job in the city I'd left, of books and silence and things not said. Then the things said, and I sat in the carriage, wearing dark glasses at night to hide my tears. I remember parking at the station, pressing the alarm in my car, rushing to catch a train in the nick of time. Waiting on the cold station in winter, holding a dying blackberry in my hand. Us exploding quietly. I held my food bag, my handbag, my resentment. The twinkle on a text on a Samsung takes me back to those days in an instant. Coming home tired after the bus, to the station, the train ride, then the car journey home in traffic. And we were no longer us as I walked through the door. Someone's phone goes, in a shop in the street, and I am back on the trains, hearing the cell phones beep. Back to the 9 months when we stopped holding on. Thank you. My voice is starting to get a bit coffee, so leave it up there. Happy to answer any questions if you have.
Thank you very much, Arja, for sharing all those different strands of your story and very evocative of place and history and relationships and especially moving to hear the love poems or the poems about relationships in that sense. Could we please have a round of appreciation for Arja? Just heard for Aria. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thanks, Chiara.
It's gorgeous. Thank you.
Everyone else. Oh, thank you. Nayenda is saying that was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
If anyone has any questions or would like to make any comments, you could please raise a hand, an actual or virtual hand, and we can take it from there.
I'm actually battling to find out where I can raise my hand. I can't see the the instruction.
All good, Gary. Go for it.
Okay, all right. Forgive me for not raising my hand. Aria, basically, in a nutshell, well done. I think those poems are very courageous and well done on actually expressing your feelings through those poems and exploring their feelings as well, quite comprehensively, and sharing them with us. Thank you.
Gary.
Deirdre, your hand is raised.
Thank you so much. Aria, there was a lovely reading.
Thank you.
I find your writing very courageous in the sense that it literally confronts your past and who you are and your family background and the complex circumstances that raised you as you are. I know that our shared mentor, Douglas Reed Skinner, is not very fond of people making poetry out of their lives. How do you feel about it?
I think poetry can be anything we want it to be. Whether it's making poetry out of our lives, like I suppose some of my poetry is confessional, like the confessional poets, and Sexton and Sylvia Plath and all of them, or whether we want to write kind of stories in poems, which I have sometimes done. I mean, I haven't read them tonight, but for a while I was also imagining myself into photographs and writing from kind of like regarding the people in the photographs as characters and writing them as characters. So that isn't obviously writing about my life. So I really think that poetry should be and can be anything we want it to be. whatever it is, and whatever we enjoy reading, whatever that might be. If we want to write poetry like that, I think that's also acceptable. I've always been against rules in writing, and I still am.
I must say that's a great answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Deborah. I see a question here from Karen Jennings. Shall I just read it out? She says, years ago you spoke about how much you love writing short stories, long short stories in particular. I'm wondering how you feel the process of reading, writing poetry differs from that of short stories for you. I think for me, poems are moments. Although I write about events in my past and they aren't particular moments, but for me, a poem takes a moment and just looks at it briefly, I suppose. And some ideas come to me as poems, and they can't be anything else. And some ideas come to me as short stories, long short stories. I do read quite widely, and I read all sorts of length of short stories. But it's strange that when I do write short stories, so many competitions say, please stick to 5,000 words or whatever it might be. And I have such a hard time sticking to 5,000 words. I can cut down and I can edit and I can, enter competitions or send to journals, etc., and get it down to that magic 5,000 words. Just recently I heard, or I saw it on my email, the Caine Prize is asking for short stories. And in previous years, it always used to be 5,000 words. And now they're actually asking for short stories of 5,000 to 10,000 words. So I think that's brilliant, absolutely brilliant, because I think there's a place for longer short stories as well as flash fiction, which I've also read. But for myself, writing poetry begins with an image, as does writing a short story. But I can write sort of 2-3 poems in an evening or a day or whatever it might be. And that's it. That idea has now been masticated, processed, whatever you might want to say. Whereas, of course, I have an idea for a short story or novellas, which are also like writing, and I'm writing a short novel. I don't know how long it will be. I'm calling it a short novel. That's quite different in that it's not just a moment in my head. It's a whole story. Although it begins with an image, just like a poem begins with an image, I know that there are characters. I know that there's an arc. I know that there's perhaps an epiphany that comes at the end or in the middle or wherever it might come. I can see it like a river. And maybe that's a way of actually explaining how the difference that I see between the two of them. A poem is a pond and it's contained and it's just that moment, whereas a story is a river. And by that token, I suppose a novella or a novel is more of a huge lake, Lake Malawi. So yeah, I think I would say that you can see a story, whereas you can't really see a story as in a poem, although poems can tell stories, and I have told stories. Oh, thanks, Karen.
Thank you for all these amazing questions and for your illuminating and very clear answers, Arja. Jack, your hand is up. Hey.
For me. Yeah, that was a lovely greeting. Thanks, Arja. I loved your I also I love your storytelling, and I'm interested in your relationship to surprise. I was thinking now, yes, there are more confessional writers and less confessional writers, but sometimes I think the real distinction is between people who take you on a journey and they know where they're taking you, and people who start writing a poem and they don't really know where it's going. And there are times when I feel you're telling a story and you know where you're taking us. And there are other times when the dead speak to you in a dream and you you don't know they say. Um,
Mm.
wonder if you wanted to say something about that.
Mm. Although with a poem I may know what I want to express in the poem, the writing is a surprise. So, for example, the first poem that I read, Adios mi vida, which was about saying goodbye to my Spanish grandmother, but then talking about how she searched for me for years, and there was just the trail was cold, and it's hard to believe before social media and Facebook and everything else, but it was hard to get hold of people if they weren't around, in your line of sight, so to speak. So although the idea was, sorry, although the idea was in my mind to write about my grandmother, I didn't know what I was going to say exactly. I knew that I wanted to write about the fact that she searched for me for years. But, I'm just reading it, I'm just looking down at it now. I didn't know I was going to go back to when I went to Paris and that she made me a sandwich, which was such an act of love. And it was so welcome that night in Paris when, I just didn't even know how to phone South Africa. And, I was trying to phone South Africa to tell my mother that I'd arrived and all of that. So, I could eat the sandwich and then finally begin to think and talk to the Frenchman down at the reception who sort of vaguely helped me. So it's a surprise in terms of what happens. And the same thing happens with my short stories. I know that I want to write a story about, I'm just thinking of a story of mine that began as an image in my mind of a man in a Johannesburg park walking his dog. And I didn't know very much about him. All I knew was that he was immigrating. And that was one of the last walks he was going to have with his dog, because I can't remember if they took the dog, they were going to Australia, or whether they, the dog was going to another home or whatever it might be. So I knew nothing. All I knew was this man was immigrating. So for me, it was a total surprise what happened in the story. And the interesting thing is that, he has appeared again. This story was written in 2007. He's appeared again, and this time he's with a dog and he's next to a lagoon. And he's talking to me, and I know this sounds all very arty-farty and very fairy-like. But he's talking to me, but right now, until I sit down and let him talk to me, I'm not quite sure. And I'm not sure if the lagoon is here in this country or whether the lagoon is where they went, in which case I'm going to have to do some research because I don't know Australia and I don't know lagoons in Australia and all of that. So it's a surprise. But I found that when I started to write my novel, I had to plot it out. It's very briefly plotted out. I don't have pages in the scenario and plot points and beat points and all that. It's also not that kind of novel. It's a novel of characters and very character driven. But I needed to know what chapter one would consist of, and I needed to know what chapter two. So I know what the chapters will consist of, but I don't know how I'm going to get from A to B in those chapters or to C. That's a surprise. And I have this idea of, it's like a hazy idea of what the story is. But I can't tell you all the road maps or all the road signs along that path.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely.
Thanks, Jacques, for the question.
Thank you, Arja, and thanks, Jacques. I was thinking that the element of surprise when I relate what you were just saying, particularly to your last poem about the train, a lot of shifts, things that happen on that point.
Yeah, they are. When I was reading it, I was hoping it was all very clear. But I hope so.
No, it was. It's
Okay.
lovely to follow. Is there anyone else who'd like to ask a question as a comment for Arja? Okay, then we can wrap it up here and take a short break. If we could give another round of applause, appreciation for Arja. Thank you, Arja. It's lovely.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, so it's 12:08 South African time over here, so we'll be back just after 1:15, I'd say. Okay, thank you all.
Thank